Inspired and somehow jealous of the Noldorian elves' power in battle, Morgoth planned to breed a new race of monsters. Dragons. They were greedy, slick, and malicious, corrupted by Morgoth to serve as powerful war beasts. Today on Fantasy Archive, we'll go over the most famous dragons of Middle-earth, what they looked like, and what victories they brought the Dark Lord before they were brought to their death. Dragons, also known as great worms, serpents, or simply drakes, were mighty, evil, and powerful creatures, as feared as they were admired. J.R.R. Tolkien features dragons inspired by those of European legend, dragons mentioned in Beowulf, and in the prose and poetic Edda of medieval Iceland. Most of Tolkien's creatures have a clear origin. It is not the case for dragons. Their origins are not confirmed. Some say that Morgoth created the dragons. It is more likely, however, due to the dragons having free will, that they were simply beasts and Morgoth corrupted them, much like the orcs. Others say dragons could be Maya that shapeshifted into dragon form. They could also be descendants of Mayas and beasts, referred to by Gandalf as nameless things. But what beasts? Serpent-like reptiles? Or ancestors of the fell beasts ridden by Nazguls? Well, whether they were embodied Maya, corrupted such as the Balrogs, or descendants of Mayas and beasts, dragons became a self-sustainable, independent race that lived throughout the First, Second, and Third Age of Middle-earth. It took dragons 3 centuries to grow from infancy to adulthood. They understood many tongues and were known for speaking in riddles. They had a fervent lust for treasure, especially gold. These terrifying creatures would sleep on the hoards of all they had stolen. They didn't only want the riches. They enjoyed the process of taking it from others, preferring to steal the treasure than find new, unclaimed valuables. Dragons often put a greater priority on possessing gold than on obtaining food, for they could survive without food, maybe even water, for decades or even centuries. This suggests that jewels may be primal sources of the great serpent's life forces, though they could simply possess extremely slow metabolisms, similar to other reptiles. Due to this fact, dragons of Arda may have been immortal in ideal conditions. Dragons were long-lived, intelligent, and physically strong creatures covered in impenetrable iron scales everywhere except their soft, slim underbellies. This was their only known weakness. Some dragons had 4 legs but could crawl like snakes. They were known to sleep with half eye open, always remaining alert. Some had wings, some didn't have them. They also had an acute sense of smell, which made it impossible to pass undetected. They were able to petrify and hypnotize with a glance of their eyes. Using their eyes and words, they cast curses and had a compelling hypnotic power called Dragon Spell. They could use psychological manipulation, taunting their subjects with some inner conflict. Those clever enough would talk vaguely and never give direct information. Refusing an answer would likely invite an attack. Bilbo Baggins used this knowledge in his favor during his confrontation with Smaug, entertaining him with vague doublespeak in order to keep him mentally occupied and avoid his rage. There were 2 main types of dragons. The fire drakes, or Uraloki, which could breathe fire. Fire hot enough that they could melt rings of power, except for the 1 ring. Such a thing happened with 4 out of the 7 rings given to the Dwarf Lords. The cold drakes. They lacked the ability to breathe fire, but were still strong foes with wicked claws and terrible fangs. It is unknown if instead of fire they could breathe water or ice. Only 4 dragons were known by name. Glaurung, the very first dragon, also known as the father of the dragons. He had 4 legs and could breathe fire, but couldn't fly. Even without wings, he was the greatest terror of his time. He emerged from Angband in FA 260, attacking the elves maintaining the siege of Angband. He burned and ravaged Ardgaren and the settlements of Hithlum and Dorthanion. He was driven back by Fingon, Prince of Hithlum, and his archers, as his skin was not yet thick enough to withstand the arrows. Morgoth was displeased, as he did not intend to reveal Glaurung until he was fully grown and at his full strength. Glaurung would be contained for another 2 centuries before being let loose during the 4th and 5th battles in the War of the Jewels. He was victorious in both these battles and the sack of Nargothrond, where he froze Turin with his eyes, later deceiving him, causing the death of Finduilas, a Noldor elf princess. Years later, Glaurung would face his death, stabbed by Turin's sword on the dragon's attack of Brethil. In the last moments, Glaurung caught Turin's love, Nienor, in his spell, and thinking Turin was dead, she jumped down into a river. Turin soon awoke, discovering what happened, and threw himself on his sword. And Calagon the Black is the first and mightiest of all winged dragons, with a hotter fire breath than the rest. It was said he could cover the whole light from the sun when he opened his wings. His appearance is restricted to the War of Wrath, when the host of the Valar was destroying Morgoth's armies, and Calagon burst out of Thangorodrim volcano with other lesser dragons, making them retreat and consider ending the war because of the devastating fire. Eärendil, a half-elf mariner, came out of the west along with Thorondor, king of the eagles, and the eagles of Manwë. They fought throughout the night. Soon, almost all dragons were defeated. Eärendil killed Ancalagon. The death of Ancalagon marked the end of Morgoth's final resistance. Both Glaurung and Ancalagon were First-Age dragons. Garthar was a mighty longworm. Little is known about his life, except for that he possessed great hoards of treasure stolen from the dwarves. He was slain by a man called Fram, son of Frumgar. In Skathar's hoard was a silver horn, which the dwarves were claiming, stating it was from the dwarven making. Fram would not give them anything, claiming the hoard as his own, and sending them a necklace made of Skathar's teeth for jewels. The dwarves slew Fram for the insult. This horn is said to be the horn of Rohan that Alwyn gave to Merry Brandybuck after the War of the Ring many hundred of years later. Smaug, the last of the great dragons of Middle-earth. He, like many others, would hear of the wealth and magnificence of Erebor, so he flew south, like a hurricane coming from the north, and attacked the dwarven kingdom of the Lonely Mountain. He killed all the dwarves before turning his attention to the men of Dale. Only Thror, king under the mountain, and his son Thrain II managed to escape using the secret side door. Thorin Oakenshield was one of the few dwarves that were not in the mountain at the time of the attack. Years later, Gandalf meets Thorin, and conversations about retaking the mountain begin. Bilbo Baggins is hired as a burglar. Returning to Erebor through the secret door, Bilbo attempts to steal, but Smaug immediately notices. After a few exchanged words, Smaug knows Bilbo is aiding for Thorin and the dwarves. Smaug flew into a rage, turning his fury on Lake Town. Bard the Bowman, heir to the throne of Dale, did his best to rally the townsmen to repel the dragon's assault, but their arrows could do little against the dragon's armor. Then Bard, having been informed by a thrush of birds of Smaug's secret weakness, fired a black arrow into the vulnerable spot on the dragon's belly. Roaring in fury and pain, Smaug fell from the sky into the flaming ruins of Lake Town. His death marked the end of the great dragons in Middle-earth. There are a few dragons known only by mention in Tolkien's works. Gostir, known only by name, meaning terrible sight. The fire drake of Gondolin, who arrived over to the western walls of the city bearing Balrogs upon its back. Some unknown dragons were also said to have appeared in The Hobbit, having red eyes, black wings, and knife-like teeth. It is said that after the death of Smaug, the last dragon in the Third Age, the great dragons became extinct. But Tolkien does mention that some races of dragons still exist into the Fourth Age, though none as powerful as their predecessors.